who has two thumbs and just grew her first flush of mushrooms, this girl. Specifically wine caps. I chose that type because it has no poisonous lookalikes, and on my property in general there's a ton of mushroom activity breaking down all of my wood chips. I did not want to risk that, and I did not want to kill myself and my entire family. I also chose this variety. In addition to being easy to identify, it's a good replacement for meat. It has a nice firm texture and kind of a savory, meaty flavor. So if you're trying to stretch your budget, have less meat in it, and a little more plant-centric foods, this is a good choice. You also can't just buy it in the grocery store. I've personally never seen it in a grocery store, and for me it was a nice idea to grow something I can't just pop down to Kroger and get myself. Now, the trick with wine cap is that it does need to be grown on a hardwood substrate, and that can be a little tricky to do. Most of the wood chips you'll find readily available from places like Chip Drop are softwoods like pine. And in my case, I had two wrongs making a right. We had a massive ice storm last January that took down a large maple tree in our front yard, knocked about a third of it off, and it landed in our driveway. In order to even escape our house, we had to get that removed and chipped up. I asked them to dump the chips for me, they did, and I used them to top off my hugelkultur bed. So I did a prior video on these. When I built all these raised beds, I used large woody debris to fill the majority of it. And in the case of most of the beds, I then topped that off with compost and topsoil. This bed I did not, and instead I put a layer of those hardwood chips. I then laid down sawdust that had been infused with the spawn of wine cap mushrooms, and I put another layer of hardwood chips on top of that. A couple of details to note. One, I chose to do this during a very rainy period. There was a week where we had about 3 inches of rain in 1 week, and that was when I did it. So that was one of the keys to this working. The other key took me a long time to figure out. So I mentioned we had those hardwood chips available last January. I just got my first fruiting flush here, and that is now in May of the following year. It would have taken less time if I had done this first. So tip for all of you, put down a plastic tarp. I realized the bed was draining too quickly and it was not staying wet enough, and I laid down one of these black and white silage tarps that I use all over the place when I terminate cover crops. I weighed it down with these hoses, and after about a few months of that, I did start smelling more kind of a mushroomy smell coming out of the bed. And then just recently we had our first flush of wine caps at the edges of the bed. Success. If anybody is thinking of trying this, I do recommend it. You have to have some patience. You got to keep things damp and moist. But at the end of the day, it was not hard at all to do, and I'm now getting a ton of mushrooms. I had my first flush was 158 grams, and I just harvested another chunk this morning that were over 180 grams. So I'm really getting quite a few mushrooms out of this bed, and it's been enough for several meals, which is great because my best friend, who is currently my camera woman filming this for me, is also a professional chef, and she's staying with me. And she offered to do a lot of vegetable-centric recipes for things out of the garden while she's here. So I've been filming her doing that, and she made one for me unplanned because of this mushroom flush that we got. So she made a lovely mushroom risotto, and I'm going to post that as a separate video, but I will also splice a short version of it in at the end of this in case anybody's interested in how to make an absolutely bombing mushroom risotto. And if you're thinking of growing mushrooms, I do recommend it. It took a long time, but I'm like giddy. I'm so excited about this, and it is a perennial. So now that these have taken hold and I know the mycelium are working their way through the bed and slowly breaking down these wood chips, I will be getting flushes of mushrooms off of this for quite some time. Way, way, way easier than the annual crops that I mostly grow. I hope that was helpful. Stay tuned for the mushroom risotto, and otherwise, until next time, happy gardening. Thanks.
Rachel harvested these incredible wine cap mushrooms from her garden, the very first ones that came in. You can see from the size of my hand how big they are. They did open up all the way, so the stems are a little bit tough. However, they're definitely not lost. We're gonna make an incredible stock with them. As you can see, the hollow parts is still pretty tender, so I'm gonna chop those up and add them to the risotto itself. We're also prepping them by scraping out a lot of the gills. Gills can be spongy, sometimes bitter in flavor, and then they'll also make it much darker, muddier appearance. So similar to a portobello in this stage, chefs would typically scrape the gills. The best way to do it is with a spoon. If you have a grapefruit spoon and it's already serrated, that's even better. But you literally are just gonna be rubbing and scraping it off, just like that. What I have here to add to the stock that normally would be thrown away, these are all incredible bursts of flavor, and you might as well get flavor from them for free, are the very tops of green onions. And then we've got the core of an onion, the very top of an onion that you cut off, and don't use. And then these kind of funny bits. A little bit of peel, it's not that big of a deal. It's gonna add a nice rich color. Okay. Garlic, same thing. We've got that great garlic peel, which has got, honestly, a lot of garlic flavor. We've got the bottom of the cloves that you cut off. We have those little ones that are caned to peel, right? We're just gonna use them there. We've got a couple tomato cores. You don't wanna go overboard on the tomato, but a little bit of tomato flavor is nice, and you might as well. And then we have some herbs. We're gonna be adding some of these herbs to the risotto at the end anyway. We've got some sage stems, and parsley stems. Parsley stems have an incredible amount of parsley flavor, and they're often just thrown away. So we're gonna add a little bit of nice rich flavor to that.
So once we had all our veggies in the pot, we covered it with water, brought it to a simmer, and simmered it for about 30 minutes. Any longer than that, and the flavors start to muddy, especially when you use such fresh herbs and things. Keep that time much lower than you would expect with a traditional like meat bone stock. And then you can turn the heat off and let it all just hang out together for a couple hours and strain it and refrigerate it overnight if you're going to be refrigerating it.
We've got all our risotto prep. We've got our stock that was up to a boil and turned it back down just so you can see it nice and steamy. I've had a pan preheating on low. We'll go back up to medium and have all our ingredients ready to rock. We're adding a little bit of a blend of extra virgin olive oil and a little knob of butter to the pan. Every other risotto, I start with the onions and garlic. But here, the mushrooms take longer to really get enough color, and they're going to release a lot of moisture to begin with. Now we're going to crank it up to high. We're going to start by getting these really nicely sauteed. Add some salt, because salt will help to bring that moisture out, and some pepper. It's really important to season every step in this recipe so that you can just build all that flavor up. You'll notice I cut these mushrooms very small. Same with the onions. In traditional Italian risotto, nothing is larger than the size of the grain of rice. As you can see, all of that moisture that was released has begun to evaporate. So now is a great time to add the onions and garlic. Before we do that, I'm going to add another little knob of butter or a little splash of oil to really make sure those onions don't stick. And again, we're going to salt it just a bit to help those veggies release their moisture. As you can see, the onions are really starting to soften, get some good translucence. So now we're going to add some chopped sage and some thyme to especially bring out some of the nuanced flavors of the mushroom. We're going to finish with a little parsley too for some color and brightness. I had to stop myself from adding any rosemary because it would just be way too Scarborough fare. Once we get our herbs in, we're going to add our rice. In traditionally Italian, you would just do a very light toast because you don't want to change the color of the finished product. But this step is really key. This helps to develop each flavor of the grain, just adds another depth. And it's a really nice complement to the toastiness of the mushroom. So we've got the rice toasted up nicely. We're going to add our white wine. I'm just turning the pan down to a medium high. Definitely use whatever wine you got open. Our wines teacher at school said there's two types of wine, wines you like and wines you don't. So we add a nice splash. That'll be the first cooking liquid we add. All right, so you'll see I'm stirring it occasionally until that liquid just about evaporates, which is pretty close to now. And then we'll add some of this lovely mushroom stock that we made earlier. Ladle if you're more comfortable. This is a little bit heavy on that pour. I would have maybe done a little bit less, but that's pretty good. So you see the liquid is just about fully evaporated here. So we're going to add the next batch. All right, so we're just about there with the next batch of liquid. Stirring occasionally. You really don't need to stir it all the time, but come in and give it a good stir once in a while. We are using the traditional arborio rice. You can use carnaroli too, or if you follow a low-carb diet, there's all kinds of awesome options to use. Cauliflower is the most known and most classic, but we had those mushroom stems and we were wondering, hey, can you use those as your rice replacement? If they were tender all the way through, we definitely could have chopped those up and used those instead of rice. Or to replace half the rice or something if you're looking for just a reduced carb. Interestingly too, I discovered that you can use hemp seeds as a rice type replacement, which would add a ton of omegas, really healthy fiber, and some good fats. Now, if you're in Italy, they would probably serve it at this point. But in America, we like it a little softer. So I'm going to add the rest of this liquid for the final dose there. Now we're going to finish it up. Add a last little knob of butter. We're going to add a hearty amount of cheese and a nice pinch of parsley. Plus a little pepper. And check your seasoning for salt here too, once your cheese goes in. Traditionally, it does have this more soupy kind of flavor because by the time you serve it and bring it to the table, it will have absorbed. It should flow on the bottom of the plate. In America, we see it in mounds, but traditionally it's more...
Spreads out. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to let that sit. Top it with a little more Parmesan. Sprinkle of parsley, and you're good to go.
I'll do a little glorious pan over of this pan.
Ooh.